It's Sunday morning. We have Hurricane Teddy on the left, Tropical Storm Beta. I'm sorry, Hurricane Teddy on the right, Tropical Storm Beta on the left, and nice clear skies across much of the Northeast and Mid Atlantic states with just a few patchy clouds. It is the Sunday morning, Joe, the Sunday morning Joe and Joe weather show, fresh after a Saturday night Joe and Joe weather show.
17 hours ago, you and I were together, and here we are now. And Joe, if you're a connoisseur of the skies like I am, not quite a clear and pristine morning to start off the day. We do have some mid and high level cloudiness. I had alluded to that on Friday, and I said that we might see something like that because of the passage of this upper level system, which eventually is going to become a player in Hurricane Teddy's movement toward the Maritimes of Canada. So that little disturbance is churning up the atmosphere enough to provide us with some cloudiness. No big deal, no major problem. It's still going to be an unseasonably cool, dry day out there, but again, not as pristine and as glorious as what we enjoyed here during the day yesterday.
Well, down by me, because I'm a number of miles away from you, uh, it is actually still mostly not a cloud here yet, and sometimes that's what happens. So sometimes the you get the cloudiness from these upper troughs that go through impact the inland areas, whereas those of us who lounge at the coast get to enjoy more sun in situations like this. And of course, the payback is when we have the onshore wind and we get the low clouds that come in here while you bask in glorious sunshine there up in the rural areas of upstate New York.
In the boondocks.
I wouldn't call it the boondocks. It's not the
No,
boondocks.
well, it's not the boonies, but
And
it's
there's
not.
something to be said to be for living in the boondocks, by the way, instead of the normally warmer urban settings.
Yes.
For one thing, uh, if for only this reason, if you're a snow lover, you usually do get to tolerate the rain snow line for a longer period of time than you do in the normally warmer urban locations.
Right. And the urban areas have changed quite a bit over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, on the few times that I go over the Throgs Neck or Whitestone Bridge and look back toward New York now, it almost appears to me, if you can, if it's the analogy would be like a freshly cut lawn with a few sprouts here and there, the sprouts being skyscrapers. Now it looks like just weeds have sprouted up every which way. The skyline that you and I grew up with as young people many years ago doesn't exist anymore because the real estate people just continually are building, building, building. I predicted about 50 years when you look toward the skyline of New York, it's not going to look like a skyline anymore. It's going to be like one big giant lump, so to speak. And you wouldn't be able to see the Empire State Building or
Well,
any of the.
yeah, the Bronx when you and I occupied it or moved to the Bronx was actually considered rural in a lot of ways.
Right.
It was all homes. There were very you got to the apartment buildings when you went down further south into the Bronx and then over toward Manhattan, of course, but it was much more rural. Yeah, things change. That's what life is. Life is about change, and if it didn't change, we'd all be bored with it, and it wouldn't mean anything. And that's
And
how.
then what they do is they say, look at global warming because it never gets anywhere near as cool as it did just a few years ago in New York.
Right.
It's not global warming. It's the building up of all of those big buildings all over the place.
Right, and oddly enough, in that whole stretch of time, all the New York City used to be a big area of industry, of manufacturing and industry.
Right.
That's all gone. There's
Yeah.
there you drive in on. I can remember the days when there was actually smog that was produced by a lot of the industry in the city. That's all gone now. So you're right. It is. It's all the buildings. It's all the heat island nonsense that goes on.
I used
So
to when I used to live in East Harlem when I was growing up.
as did
One of the
I.
things one of the things I used to enjoy watching was the ships that used to go up and down the East River. There was the Washburn Wire Company on 117th Street, and
I
you're
remember.
right. There was
Yes.
a lot of industry going on, a lot of things happening. The bridges, the Triborough, the Willis Avenue Bridge were constantly opening and closing because marine traffic was so active. There was so much going on. There was things that were happening on the waterways, and now the East River is dead. Aside from maybe the occasional circle line that goes around Manhattan.
And local boaters.
Yeah, yeah,
The world changes, Joe. It doesn't stay the same. That's just the way it is. If it stayed the same, you'd be bored with it. And the fact that it changes and goes away, things that have a beginning, middle, and an end have value to you.
right.
They mean something to you because they end. That's how it works.
Right.
If it didn't end, you wouldn't care.
Well,
So
that's our Sunday morning. That's our Sunday morning soliloquy on life, and now
right
let's
now we can go on to
on to
weather.
the weather.
So we have Beta and Teddy, and I've got the U.S. satellite view up right now, Joe. And the thing is, neither system really looks especially impressive at this point. Teddy has degraded overnight. The Hurricane Center making note of the fact that it doesn't look nearly as impressive as it did yesterday, and part of the issue is if you look to the north and west, you've got an old frontal boundary sitting out there with the clouds running off the southeast coast and out into the open waters of the Atlantic. And were it not for the upper trough, which if you look at the loop, you see the clouds that are in upstate New York. That's actually the upper trough swinging through. If it weren't for that, Teddy would be getting caught inside this frontal boundary here, and it would be making its way, turning to the north and northeast. So it would be doing something like, whoops, let's get that. Let me get my pen turned on, and it would be doing something like this and passing well south and east of Nova Scotia. But Joe, that upper trough is the reason why that upper trough is going to swing on through. The bottom part of that trough just kind of drops down off the east coast there and picks up Teddy and shoots it up straight northward, right toward Nova Scotia.
And that storm system will likely cause some problems for the folks in Nova Scotia, and maybe even for Newfoundland. Although by the time it gets to Newfoundland, it will have weakened a bit from its interaction with Nova Scotia, but still a formidable or formidable, whichever way you want to say it, system for the Maritimes coming on Tuesday and Wednesday. Although thankfully, it does not look like the kind of system that really would wreak a lot of havoc. We were talking about in 2003, there was Hurricane Juan with 100-mile-per-hour plus winds, and that storm, a memorable one in the annals of Nova Scotia. It doesn't look like Teddy is going to be quite Juan-like, but still enough to be concerned about, I think, for the early part of this week.
Right, and it will transition into a post-tropical cyclone, which, as we spoke of yesterday, when they become post-tropical, or in other words, they start to look like the non-tropical systems you see in the wintertime. The heavy rains shift to the west side and the stronger winds shift to the east side. You no longer have a concentration of maximum sustained winds near the center, but instead you have a wider, the area of gales winds up expanding, so you have a lower maximum sustained wind, but you do have a larger area of gales covering more geography, and that's something that happens quite often with these types of storms when they move up into the northern latitudes. Meanwhile, we have Tropical Storm Beta, which Joe is undergoing some shear. It has this northeast southwest tilt to it. It seems to me that this is not going to be able to strengthen very much in the environment that it's in. Although I would just caution, since we've already seen a few of these storms decide that it's perfectly reasonable to strengthen when they're within 50 miles of making landfall. But aside from that, the story for this, in my view, continues to be the heavy rains that are going to be produced. And right now, that heavy rain has been into southern Louisiana. There hasn't really been very much happening in terms of rainfall back into parts of southeast Texas, but that's going to change once the center moves westward. This is going to be one of those heavy, wet tropical storms that where rain is the big deal.
Rain is going to be a big deal. It has been a big deal for especially the Gulf coastal region for the last few weeks. And how ironic is it that you see all that rain falling in one part of the country, and one other part of the country that needs it badly still continues to be rather dry. Although the West looks like it's going to be, at least in the Pacific Northwest, some activity occurring over the coming days ahead that may lead to a bit of much needed rainfall, but certainly nothing to compare with what they have been seeing down across the Gulf Coast, where they've had excessive amounts of rain.
Right. The smoke, by the way, on the satellite, you can see that milky white across the middle and upper Mississippi Valley and down into Texas and into the Southwest. That is the smoke, and there's a sharp line. You can actually see, Joe, the western edge of the high because where the smoke, there's a sharp dividing line where the smoke ends and the clearer skies begin, and that's your big surface high pressure that's ridged into the upper Midwest back to about Chicago. I'm
Right,
actually kind of impressed at uh, you, how sharp the line is. You go from no smoke to smoke. It's just there's no transition at all, and it's the wall of that upper ridge, the core, the covering of the dry air that's over the Northeast. And you know what? I'm going to bring up. I'm going to go to the Pacific because I do want to show what you just mentioned with the what's going on out there in the Pacific, because there are some changes in the upper atmosphere that are happening, and that's not the shot I wanted. So let's try again. Okay, U.S. Pacific coast. Let's see if this one works. Well, this is sort of okay. I'm not too thrilled by it, but I'm trying to see if I can find a wider shot. It's funny. I'm always looking for the shot. It's never exactly in the right geography that I want. We'll try this one. I'll just get all of the shots and maybe get as wide a shot as I can out of it.
right.
But we do have some changes here that are important in the Pacific Northwest, and you start to see on the upper left there are some brighter white clouds that are approaching, and that is the next storm system that is going to be at least moving into the Pacific Northwest with some heavy rain. I gotta believe that there's a better shot here. Hang on, there's got to be a shot of Canada somewhere. Nope. Oh, we can go. Oh, I could go to Go 17. Here we go. Let's see if I can. This might work a little bit better. Okay, Canada. All shots. Sometimes, folks, I do this. It's sort of if I'm not planning, and I kind of ad lib it as I go along. And
Well, they should have
there we go. Now I got the shot I wanted. Okay,
all
just get
channels, all channels here for Canada.
yeah, no, I got it. And all right, so
Hope
here
not all the time.
right, we'll give it a chance to load, but the Pacific is starting to open up a little bit. This is actually a really nice shot, Joe, because it's got most of the United States and all of Canada, and the oceans on either side. But you're starting to see action coming into the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. There's a fairly strong shortwave trough that's approaching. And far enough south. So this is going to bring in some rain. And then there's another system in the Gulf of Alaska with a weather front that's offshore that's kind of pushing all of this in. And we also can see the departing system that is moving out of Montana and into southern Canada now. And of course, all the dry air that you see sitting in the eastern part of the United States. I love this shot. This is actually a really cool shot on the of the satellite loop.
It
And then
almost
there's
looks like
that.
the kind
And
of
look at that frontal boundary in the east.
it almost looks like the kind of shot that Dr. Frank Field used to show each night on his NBC Channel 4 weathercast.
Yeah.
A full straight on view instead of any kind of angular type
And
of.
you can also, by the way, if you look closely and try to sort of grasp both ends at the same time, you see how the atmosphere really works here as these weather systems just move along one after another in a relationship. As one system moves up, it impacts the system ahead of it. Then there's the systems behind it, and if you look on the East Coast, you see that conveyor belt of clouds that's moving southwest to northeast. Again, if it were not for the upper trough that's moving into the northeast at the moment, Teddy would be caught in that and it would miss Nova Scotia and miss Newfoundland and go out on its merry way into the open waters of the Atlantic. So, um, some changes, of course, coming. And as far as this week is concerned for us, we're going to be in good shape here, Joe. I don't think we may not see any rain right through next weekend, the way it looks.
It's quite possible. I would agree with you. It looks like we're going to be in a long-term spell of dry weather. The only thing that's going to be happening, I think, over the next week or so is the fact that the leaves on the trees have now begun their fall, Joe, and maybe that's why we call it the season, the fall season. They're going to be falling and beginning to accumulate to a degree, and it will be time, I guess, by later in the week or next weekend get that rake out because it's going to be time to start the first round of raking, which then will persist right on through October and to just about Thanksgiving,
Radar
depending upon
shows.
where you are.
Yeah, exactly. Radar shows the rain actually has gotten a bit less today with Tropical Storm Beta in southeast Louisiana, but just covering a small area there. Still getting some rain into, excuse me, coastal Mississippi, Alabama, and into the panhandle of Florida. But we're now starting to see some rain come into the view of the radars off the coast of southeast Texas around Galveston and Port Arthur, and we're seeing some rain backing westward. So this probably is a good indicator that beta, in one form or another, is beginning to move a little bit. And on the surface map this morning, a little early here. This is the 9Z map. Let's see if they have the 12Z surface map, and they do not. Oh, yes, they do have it. So you can see where the WPC folks have plotted beta. The actual center is still far offshore, but there's because of that sheared look, there's very little going on there. And then, of course, you don't have Teddy yet on the plot here on the surface map. It's kind of off their range, but you do see the big high that is up in southeastern Canada. And this would be a surface, Joe, in the wintertime where we'd probably be seeing temperatures down in the single digits and below zero over a large part of the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. It's that kind of a high. You see them in the fall, and then you don't see them at all in the wintertime. They disappear.
Yes, they do. Except their brethren that appear during the winter season usually are those 1050 millibar monsters that push on down from central Canada, which, by the way, we didn't see very much of this past winter, Joe, thanks to extenuating
Right, or the
circumstances
winter
in
before, for
the
that
atmosphere.
matter. Yeah,
Yes,
or the
yes.
winter before, and maybe even the winter before that. WPC rainfall. Here's something you don't see for the next 7 days. You don't see this very often, but from North Carolina and Virginia all the way up to Maine, except for extreme southeastern Maine, not a drop of rain for the next 7 days. And the big rainfall amounts continue to be from the Alabama Gulf Coast west into Texas. Down almost to, but not quite to about Corpus Christi. We're looking at still a fairly large area of 5 to 10 and even an area of 10-inch plus rainfalls. And for some areas, this is in addition to all the rain that's fallen over the last few days. And then, as you said, Joe, the Pacific Northwest looking to get a lot of rain in Washington State. Looks like the western half of Washington State and the western part of Oregon could wind up with a good soaking rain over the next 7 days with significant amounts of rainfall, especially when you move up into Washington State. So this should at least help to quench and maybe put out some of the wildfires that are going on in Washington and Oregon. But on the other hand, it's still bone dry for much of California and the Southwest. That's going to take a little more work to do.
Save for the extreme northwestern part of California, and even though the parts of, let's say, northern and central California aren't going to receive any significant rainfall, the humidity levels have to have climbed. I mean, from the bone dry conditions that they've had over the last week or 10 days, and that certainly will aid firefighters to some degree. Again, although, as you pointed out, Joe, most of California out in the clear with dry weather for the next 7 days.
All right, so let's run through what's going on with the tropics. Really, not a whole lot has changed in the forecast logic since yesterday. Here's the latest satellite loop of Tropical Storm Beta. I'm just updating it now, and you can see that there is a cluster of bright white clouds, a center of and strong convection. The center of circulation is kind of sitting on the edge of that again because we are seeing a bit of wind shear going on. Also, hasn't really moved very much from overnight. It's probably inching toward the west, and there's a fairly strong band of rain that's out to the east of it. that's running up into southeast Louisiana. But clouds are spreading westward into Texas now, so maybe it's starting to inch a bit to the west. The hurricane tracking models pretty much, again, unchanged. The only minor change I would say is that they are fairly clustered to bring this into the Texas coast, somewhere between Corpus Christi and Galveston. And then we get a sharp right turn on most of the models, but it's a very, very slow motion that we're talking about here. So, again, heavy rain is going to be the big problem because of the lack of the upper air steering currents that are there. The latest advisory from the Hurricane Center at 11 a.m. Eastern time. The forecast really doesn't change very much. It doesn't strengthen. They don't strengthen it to a hurricane, and it's hard for me to see how it's going to happen with that going on and not showing signs of relaxing. 27 to 93 west. Top winds are 60 miles an hour. That's where it's been for 2 days, moving west at every bit of 3 miles an hour, Mr. Rayo. And
I
meanwhile,
could run
hurricane.
faster than that.
What's that?
I could run faster than that.
Yes, and Hurricane Teddy is not nearly as well defined as yesterday. Also, some shear going on, and you notice to the north and west there's that frontal boundary that is running clouds in both directions. So that gives you an idea that some of the bottom clouds are going northeast southwest. The upper clouds are going southwest northeast. And the feathering that you might notice in tropical systems when they are developing, you see there's like a feathering of the higher clouds on the outer portion of the hurricane. Well, you're not seeing the feathering here, so that sort of tells you that there's certainly no strengthening going on at the moment. The forecast track has essentially remained unchanged right up to Nova Scotia, so that pretty is consistent. And the hurricane tracking models, if there's one thing that's happened, Joe, is that uh, the models have maybe shifted a little bit further to the east, which is why the track is now over the eastern part of Nova Scotia and then over Newfoundland. And as you pointed out, um, it's likely to be maybe a little less formidable as it moves northeast, where it does weaken a bit. Most of the models do show that it does reach its peak intensity on its final approach to Nova Scotia, and then it starts to wane a little bit. It'll be a rough go, but I'm fingers crossed that it's going to be manageable.
Well, 2 or 3 days ago, it looked like the storm would be moving much quicker. It looked like it was going to be making landfall in Nova Scotia during the day on Tuesday, but now, based upon the new track, it doesn't even reach the coast of Nova Scotia, eastern Nova Scotia, until Wednesday morning. And it does slow up quite a bit from previous tracks, from previous forecasts. And that too may play a role or a hand in things because, as we've been mentioning, or at least I've been mentioning over the last few days, a rapidly moving storm, even though it may be weakening some with rapid forward speed, that certainly helps to induce stronger winds and more possible damage. But now it looks like the storm is slowing up a bit as well as weakening. It transitions from a tropical system on Tuesday morning to a more of an extratropical system later Tuesday and Tuesday night, still with hurricane force winds, and it'll be of tropical storm force on Wednesday morning when it finally makes landfall somewhere along the coastline of eastern Nova Scotia.
And as we check the latest GFS model, I'm going to go to the upper air here because we were having this conversation yesterday with the huge differences between the European and the GFS in the long range. The European having a very deep trough in the eastern part of the United States, and the GFS having a very strong ridge in the eastern part of the United States. Well, the overnight models seem to have gone to the idea that maybe the European has the better look, and it does seem to be consistent with what the GFS was actually showing back days ago. But for some reason, for a few model runs, it decided to sort of back away from that. But I think that has to do with since this is all coming out of the Pacific Northwest and from the Gulf of Alaska. I think it probably has to do with how the model handles those short waves that come in. But we do see a west-east flow across the Pacific into the western part of the United States, so that'll be good to bring in some moisture and some wet systems in time. And you'll notice that by the time we get to a week from now, we'll be having a very deep trough in the eastern part of the United States. And the only thing I will say is, again, is as long as there's no tropical system somewhere, say in the Bahamas, uh, this will do whatever it does, and we won't have to worry too much. But in the view of having a high amplitude pattern like this, the last thing you want to see is a tropical system down here off the southeast coast or off the Florida coast into the Bahamas, because the flow along the east coast would be almost straight south to north, and that means anything that's down there shoots up northward. So hope hoping that by the time we get to that point, Joe, that everything just kind of winds down a bit.
Yes, and yeah, the last thing you'd want to see, because we're stuck with that flow. I mean, then
Yeah,
it's just a matter then of hoping that nothing in the tropics pops up and says, "Hey, that's a nice place to go," and ends up
right.
ends
It's
up
a
taking a track up along the Atlantic seaboard.
Right, it's a window that lasts that's open for a couple of days, and then it's gone, and then it'll lift out. So it'll be a matter of if there is a system, whether something times with it. There's another trough, another deep trough that drops into the east right behind it, though, during that first week of October, which would make sense. And we also have some blocking that's developing up over Greenland. The models have been hinting about the fact that the North Atlantic Oscillation would be crashing in the through the end of the month and the beginning of October. So that could set the table for weather, regardless of the tropics, but it at least would set the table for not only cooler weather, but perhaps a wetter pattern. Because it's awfully hard around here to get it to be dry for more than 4 or 5 days in a row, let alone taking it to 16 days, which is what we're seeing, what we've seen, and the it would make sense if the overall weather pattern would shift a little bit as we went into the month of October. So we'll see what happens.
We have some relatively light winds right now, but I would suspect that as Teddy rolls up into the Maritimes during Tuesday and Wednesday, that combined with this huge high, the pressure gradient will tighten up a bit, and we'll see some pretty gusty winds, I think, develop here beginning sometime later Tuesday and probably lingering through a good part of Wednesday as well. So I mentioned the leaves a few moments ago. That certainly will start the leaves, flying, if you
Right.
will, in the air.
If you're heading down to the shore, by the way, the waves from Teddy over the next few days, but particularly as we get into Monday and Monday into Tuesday, the waves up and down the East Coast, according to what some of the models are forecasting, 15-foot waves coming into the East Coast of Florida because of the long, long fetch of northeast winds that's already begun with the high from the north. So up and down the East Coast, waves are going to be a big deal. And actually, Joe, I saw somebody posted the European model with their wave forecast was putting up some really ridiculous numbers way out in the ocean, 60, 80-foot waves out there. I mean, I don't know about that, but the bottom line is that at least if you are if you are going to the shore for something late in the season, for some late season beach enjoyment, and of course with the water temperatures warm, you might want to take a swim. Just remember that it could be especially dangerous with the rough surf and the rip currents. Otherwise, it looks pretty quiet here. You see the high in control for much of the week. There's a weak front that comes through. I'm going to just switch to a the different the precip one, because then you can see the isobars better. But you see Teddy on the right there, sort of on the edge of the range, gets close to Nova Scotia. I'll show the Canadian view in a second, but you'll see our high goes up from being up in New England, drops off the South Atlantic coast. So that allows for things to warm up here late in the week, Wednesday and Thursday. Another high builds in. Weak front comes through, looks like Joe on Friday, doesn't have much with it. A high goes by to our north. And then we have a stronger cold front setting up for early next week. And this is where that deep trough drops into the eastern part of the United States. A little bit of dark blue snow there up north of Lake Superior on the models going into Labrador. And with the trough the way it sets up, that front may try to stall out. We'll see. There's a long way to go, but for that, but that'll be the next system of importance to take a look at. And just a quick look on. Let's look at Teddy from the standpoint of the view from southeastern Canada. For those of you who are watching, this is the last run of the GFS, and you'll see that the GFS takes it to pretty much over eastern parts of Nova Scotia. Still a fairly wrapped up cyclone there. At this point, it's going to be post-tropical. You'll notice that the rain is all west of the center, very little going on to the east of the center after the initial push. And the strong winds, the gradient is not quite as tight when it moves over Newfoundland, and that would be in terms of timing. Um, Leave this out here. So this map you're seeing here is Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So we'll start it back. Approaching on Tuesday, the low at its closest point Wednesday morning, south of just south of Halifax, and then moving into eastern Nova Scotia. And by Wednesday evening, it's about to go over western Newfoundland, and then on its merry way as the next weather system behind it starts to kick it along. So
That body of
I think we're at
that
the
body
point.
of water, the body of water, by the way, don't mean to interrupt, but
No,
the body
no.
of water that's located off of the west coast of Newfoundland Island is the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So it's not out of the question if it turns a little bit more to the left of the track that it may not make landfall on Newfoundland to any great degree. It may end up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence instead, and then continue northward uh, through Labrador, and then eventually gone.
Yes. My mouse is acting a little strange right now. I'm not sure why that is. But we're back full screen, so I don't know about what your dinner plans are today, but I'm doing something I haven't done probably since last spring. I'm making. I ran out this morning to pick up what I needed, and I'm making sauce. So
Wow.
I got that cooking in this upstairs. I got my some pork spare ribs, some beef short ribs, uh, a couple of pieces of lamb, some sausage, and now I've got my meat soaking in milk and eggs in the bowl for the meatballs, which I'm going to put together. The tomato sauce is already on, the tomatoes, the peeled tomatoes, the San Marzano tomatoes. They're in the pot with the meat that I've already browned up in that pot. So they're cooking, or they're cooking, and that's my next thing to do. As soon as we get off the show, I got to go back to work in the kitchen.
What are you doing weather, Joe? You should be on the Food Network. Or this morning, my wife got very angry with me because, as you know, I always watch Sunday morning on
CBS Sunday
CBS,
morning.
and I walked by the set this morning, and on the screen there was this guy doing a cooking segment, which is kind of unusual for Sunday morning. Then they show a full screen of this guy, and I look at that and I say, "Who the heck is this schmo who's trying to show us how to cook?" And my wife indignantly said, "That schmo is Bobby Flay."
Oh,
and
I
I
listen. That's
and I
years ago at Saratoga, I sat next to him and his wife while watching races.
really
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's very nice.
I
Cool.
I
Very cool
I don't
guy.
I don't I'm not I don't watch the Food Network. I don't know these
Here's the thing.
personalities.
Here's the thing about cooking. Okay. Here is the thing about cooking. It is the absolute most, for me, it is the absolute most relaxing thing that I can do. Because while I'm cooking, that's all I'm thinking about is putting together my creation. I am not, whatever's going on in my life, whatever short term problems that have to be taken care of, they all escape the mind, and all I'm thinking about is how good my food is going to taste when it's done. And I make my meatballs, and I make I brown my meat, and I got the olive oil in the pot, and the garlic and all the rest of it. And it's to me, it's it's really an incredibly relaxing experience because everything else is gone. I also, Joe, look, I, now here's I make a distinction as long as when when one partner in the house cooks, okay, be it you or be it Mrs. Rayo or
No, not
sometimes,
me.
so
I'm
it's
the
not
king
you.
of Pomaine.
Okay, so you're basically like Fred Mertz. The only thing he knows how to make to eat is a ham sandwich. So, but I'm gonna say something. So you're not part of this. As long as one person in the house knows how to cook, you can both stay alive. Is what I'm getting at.
Right.
I actually know people that um, never, ever, ever use their kitchen. They order out for breakfast, they order out for lunch, they order out for dinner. Now, aside from being expensive, but that's their business. If they have stupid money, that's what they do with it. That's fine. But I have this inherent deep mistrust of people who can't feed themselves. If you're telling me that you don't cook because you don't know how, okay, and you're a human being that somehow has survived to adulthood, but you don't know how to feed yourself, I, I alarm bells go up because I worked with someone married couple, money. Joe, every meal, they never use their kitchen. Okay. And it just bugged me. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You don't know how to cook. You don't know how to, you would starve to death unless you could go to a store and buy something. That makes no sense to me. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. If somebody's in the audience is one of those people, I have an inherent deep mistrust of you, just to let you know.
I do know. I would think I know if it all boiled down to making something in the kitchen. I could. In fact, I remember once when my wife and kids they went on a trip to Kentucky to visit one of her relatives. I was with the dog for a few days. I remember one Saturday. I said to my dog, I said, "Guess what, Whoopi? We're having steak tonight." And I went to the store. I bought a steak and I made a steak. It must have been good. The dog ate it. I know
Yeah,
if the dog wouldn't eat it, then it'd be a problem.
I'll
But
teach you to cook. It's easy. It's easy and it's a lot of fun actually. Scott Briller, the chairman, remains. He's at home convalescing in bed with waiting for his COVID test results. He hit super chat this morning. Scott, you're in bed. You're not supposed to be doing that. So get better. And thank you very much for hitting super chat. But you're home sick. Don't worry about us. Uh,
we could come up with some questions and throw it at the chairman.
Yes, but
Rayo
he
and
did
Scott.
leave me with some questions last night. But just to let everybody know, his current conditions are that he has a temperature of 100.9, and actually, in a way, having a fever is not necessarily a bad thing, but because it shows your immune system is working. Because if you didn't have a fever, it probably would be a bigger problem. So he did say last night that his nausea was a lot better, a lot less of it. So making some progress. So he's just waiting to find out whether he has COVID or not. In the meantime, uh, sit there, watch Penny Dreadful. He started watching Penny Dreadful, my recommendation from Netflix, which is about as dark and gothic as you can get. And let's do a little bit of Briller Jeopardy. And William Huber, yeah, you're smelling my sauce on the north wind. Yeah, that would be the right direction for you to get a whiff of it. So here we go. So today's questions, Joe, center actually on Scott. So if my mouse would make sure it's working, I don't know why, but my mouse is like doing some weird jumping around. Um, so here we go. So here's question one. Uh, how many lighthouses are in the state of Maine?
Oh goodness, man, that you heard of Minnesota being the state of 1,000 lakes or whatever? I would be surprised if there was. I'm gonna go for it. I'll say 1,000 lighthouses. It's a big round number.
Okay. The second question is, in what state is John F. Kennedy buried?
In what
Senior.
state?
Yes,
Well, he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. So that's Virginia,
that is
right?
Virginia. That is correct.
Right.
How many presidents have served two terms?
Well, first of all, let's back up. Do you have an answer for the number of
Yeah,
lighthouses
I'll
in?
come back to it. I have to scroll down, and my mouse is being bad. So let's
Oh,
go through the questions, and then you keep a
okay.
track of your answers, and then we'll come back to
Okay,
the
so
question.
the third question?
The third question is how many presidents have served 2 terms?
Well, let's see. 40. There have been 45 of them. Um, I'm going to say well, let's say I'm going to say like two-thirds of them have served two terms. So I'll say like 30.
Okay. How many times has the chairman been married?
How would I know that? How would I know? I didn't even know he was married.
Okay.
I know he talks a lot about his mom and his mom's knee problems and whatever. But how many times has he been married? I'll
And
say
how many
one.
children? And how many children does he have?
I'll
Which
say one time and two kids.
okay. So the answers are there are 65 lighthouses in the state of Maine.
Is that all?
Yes.
Really?
Hmm. Virginia.
Right.
Question three. The answer is 21. What was question three? I forgot.
How many presidents have served out their entire two consecutive terms?
Um, yes.
So 21,
So the answer is 21.
including I presume that also includes FDR's four terms, and was it Grover Cleveland who had two non-consecutive terms?
Non-consecutive terms.
Yeah.
Um, and the question about how many times that the chairman has been married, the answer is two.
Okay.
Okay, so he has two ex-wives, I'm guessing, and the number of children is no children. So
Okay.
that is today's round of Briller Jeopardy.
I thought when he answered the question, he was probably alluding maybe to the fact that he was in Mickey Rooney land
Oh,
or Larry King land.
well, what did Mickey Rooney have? Like 9 or 8 or?
I think Mickey Rooney had like seven. Larry King, I lost count how many times he's been married.
That's an awful lot of alimony checks to have to write.
Yes, indeed.
All right, look, let's call it a day. It's a Sunday. It's great weather. Oh, I'm seeing some clouds rolling in from the north, so the upper trough might be getting closer to me. So um, it masks some of the sun. It is cool out there. I went out without my sweatshirt on, and it was pretty chilly. Barely back to 60 at the moment here.
We had two consecutive this morning and yesterday morning. Got down to 42. Did not get to the into the 30s, which to me is kind of surprising. I would have thought we would have made it into the 30s this morning, but again, maybe the air stirred up just enough ahead of that advancing disturbance to cause that. But we're getting there, Joe. It's getting down into that time of the year.
Little by little. All right, so everybody have a great afternoon. Enjoy it. Enjoy the last weekend of the summer season coming to an end, and autumn arrives on Tuesday. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow night on the Joe and Joe Weather Show at the usual weekday time, 7 o'clock Eastern.